Show. Turn up your mind.
Growing outrage over Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and his financial ties to a real estate mogul. Public records obtained by the nonprofit journalism outlet ProPublica appear to show billionaire Harlan Crow purchased 3 properties in Savannah, Georgia from the Thomas family in 2014. Among them, the single-story home where Thomas's mother had been living and where the conservative justice spent part of his childhood.
That is the worst place I've ever lived. My all-encompassing word is gross. I mean, it was putrid.
Crow reportedly paying over $133,000 for the home and 2 vacant lots, significantly more than ProPublica reports for other properties that Crow purchased on the same block. Just $40,000 for a pair of buildings bought a year earlier. In a statement to ABC News, Crow said the properties were bought at a market rate with the intention to one day create a public museum at the Thomas home dedicated to telling the story of our nation's second black Supreme Court justice. Either way, Thomas now faces legal questions after failing to report the purchases on financial disclosure forms.
Whoops.
Although Supreme Court justices are not bound by any code of ethics, a decades-old federal law requires disclosure of financial transactions over $1,000. That includes real estate sales.
Whether or not this type of ethics violation is going to actually result in any kind of penalty is a big question. This is really, we're in uncharted waters here.
If you were a normal government official, there's an entire sort of ethics infrastructure to enforce these rules. But one of the big questions here is whether anyone actually has the power to enforce the law when it comes to Supreme Court justices.
Thomas's ties to Crow run deep. He's called the GOP mega donor a dear personal friend. ProPublica's earlier reporting of Crow's funding of years of luxury travel and vacations is already raising questions. The justice said in a statement last week he was advised that this sort of personal hospitality from close personal friends who did not have business before the court was not reportable. Justice Thomas has not commented on this latest report, but congressional Democrats are already calling for an investigation. Others are calling for him to step down.
Okay, I'll take both. I mean, really, why is it a question if somebody breaks the law and they're sitting on the Supreme Court as to whether or not you can prosecute them for breaking the law? You know, we went through this with the presidency too, right? We went through all that, sitting president, he could actually kill somebody and, you can't indict a sitting president. Now we're finding out, that extends over to the Supreme Court too. Why? You can bribe them. You can actually say, I got your mother. What? Yes, I got your mother. This Harlan Crow dude, okay, we found out that Harlan Crow was paying, not only that he collects Nazi paraphernalia, and that he has a Garden of Evil where he has statues of every autocrat that ever autocrated in the world, right? All over his lawn there, he's got statuary. Like Mao and Lenin, and these guys really are, a piece of work. But anyway, this Harlan Crow guy, so now we have another name besides for the Koch brothers. One of them's dead, so we only have the Koch brother. But now we have new names. We have names of donors. We have names of people who have been purchasing our government, have been purchasing our Supreme Court, have been purchasing the presidency, have been purchasing the House of Representatives and the Senate. So now we have some names. Hold that in your head for a minute, okay? We'll come back to what to do now that we know the names. All right. So the scheme here was exactly what Sheldon Whitehouse said, but we didn't have names. It was dark money. Remember, it was dark money that was, capturing the court, that was corrupting the court. Something was rotten at the court. Everybody understood who was, a fair arbiter of what we were seeing. Starting with, Mitch McConnell holding Merrick Garland's seat open for 11 stinking months because Obama should not be able to appoint a Supreme Court justice with only 1 year left in his term. But Amy Coney Barrett could be put on the Supreme Court with like 8 weeks to the election. Okay, so we know something was rotten. We understood that something was rotten. And now we see that the name of the person who actually purchased for himself one Justice Clarence Thomas is Harlan Crow, because we found out that he has been giving Ginny and Clarence more than triple Clarence's annual income in vacation activities. He's been giving Clarence Thomas more than 3 times what Clarence Thomas makes off of our dime. Yes, we pay him. off of our dime as a Supreme Court justice in vacations, in super yacht trips around Europe, in, stays at his, compound in upstate New York, in, all kinds of travel, all kinds of luxury, and now we're finding out that he actually purchased Clarence Thomas's mother's house, and she's 94 years old today, still alive and still living in the house that Harlan Crow purchased. I don't know what that video of Clarence saying that was the most gross place I ever lived, it was putrid, because the photo that they showed has absolutely nothing to do with the house that Clarence Thomas was apparently raised in. First of all, he was raised in his mother's house for a little while, and then he moved to grandpa's house, right? He actually wrote a book about it, my grandfather's son, or some weird familial, thing. But that photo has nothing to do with the house that I just saw in the purchase report, right? Anyway, the purchase now puts Clarence Thomas in an interesting and unusual position, okay? Because there is one law that applies to Supreme Court justices, just one. There's just the one. Every other court has ethics rules. Every other court has conflict of interest rules, meaning that if somebody supports organizations or somebody actually gives money to organizations or is in charge of organizations or has business in front of the court through those organizations or themselves, if they have business in front of the court in any way, shape, or form, you're supposed to recuse yourself. But Clarence can't find that in writing, so he doesn't recuse himself when indeed there is, a live case in front of him having to do with his own stinking wife. Okay, so we can't really expect much from him. But the law is so lacking in this arena, but there is one. There is one law. And the law has to do with real estate. Isn't that something? Now, you may or may not remember that Harlan Crow inherited a real estate business from his daddy, okay? And that's how Harlan Crow became so freaking rich. But he's a real estate magnate, just like Trump inherited from his father, right? And his sons will inherit from him. This is old real estate money. And Harlan Crow owns a real estate empire. And so, of course, it was probably a natural idea for him to say, hey, I know a good way where I could put money in your pocket and take care of your mother for you, which is just so bizarre. And so he bought the house that Clarence Thomas said was so gross and so putrid for $133,000. And he bought 2 other lots, empty lots, on the block. And one of those lots he built a house on. Okay, Harlan Crow built a house on it, a nice 2-story contemporary house, and gave it to a police officer to live in. So Clarence Thomas's mother is living in a house where Harlan Crow is her landlord. We don't know if she pays rent to him or not, or if he gives her a free ride. We don't know. Clarence Thomas was by law required to report any real estate transaction over $1,000. That doesn't include his primary residence. This is not his primary residence. This is his mother's primary residence. And the 2 empty lots, which Clarence Thomas, in previous disclosures in the 1980s and in the 1990s, disclosed he owned a 1/3 share in, split between him, his brother, and his mother. Well, now his brother is dead. Sorry about that, Clarence. And Harlan goes and buys this and the lots, subsequently sells the lots. Clarence never reports any of this, and it's the one law that he needs to comply with.